we actually in that meeting, you're not saying anything. And I saw somebody post this on Instagram the other day. Don't talk to me after the meeting about, girl, I was going to say the same thing, or what you said was really great, or, I was going to, or I was gonna, shoulda, coulda, woulda, versus you've actually done it. You did it. And you're doing things whether I'm here or not. And so that's where I think takes accomplice to the next level, where it's not just about me interpersonally, it's you're looking at the bigger picture, and you're looking at where you're situated in the bigger picture, and you're ready to name and dismantle stuff that needs to happen, and you have an investment in there, and recognize that there could be some consequences, but I'm okay with that, because the consequences that you have may be far less than what I have as a Black woman, showing up as an authentic Black woman. So that's where, and that's kind of how I would define it. And have seen both play out, very similar to Coretta. I've been in the field for almost 15 years, and I've seen good and I've seen not so good. I've seen folks that were great allies that I know I can talk with and can kind of maneuver interpersonally. And I've seen some good accomplices that can do things interpersonally as well as systemically.
And one thing I want to add to Carla's points is that I think over time, as you establish those relationships, you get to understand intentions. Because there will be some allies who think they're accomplices, and you're like, no. And there's some people who are accomplices and don't give themselves enough credit. And so I think trying to figure out, again, listening and learning and watching people is what is their true intention. Because that has helped me across my career figure out how do I align myself with people who look like me and don't look like me in order to further equity on our campuses. So I would say watch and check their intentions, because some people are doing it to look like that cool white person who's woke. And some people, just have a t-shirt they want to wear from February 1st to February 28th, and maybe on Juneteenth, right? So part of that is just understanding that is not a fad. It is a way of life, and being able to check intentions and watch and learn their intentions in terms of establishing that trust and thinking about their role as an ally, a possible ally or an accomplice.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. And what would be your thoughts, Coretta? Because I love what you said. And I also, what came to mind was like vulnerability. Because what I'm hoping folks are hearing from some of what we're saying is that people aren't going to get it right all the time. They're definitely not going to get it right the first time, in their aim to be an ally or even an accomplice. But there's a vulnerability there that, again, like, listen, we see stuff. And perhaps this is where I'm going to get a little theoretical, right, Coretta? When we think about like Black women, if you want to pull in like theories like Black feminism, womanism, we see things. Sometimes we're there, but even in us being right in the middle, folks don't necessarily see us in the middle. And because of that, we're seeing things, and those things being actions, behaviors, even like actual gestures, interactions, or how you interact with me or with others. There's a lens in which most folks are seeing things. And it's through that lens that we're kind of like paying attention. And a lot of that is also recognizing that are you able to be just as vulnerable as sometimes I'm forced to be on a daily basis? The same way, while we're forced to be vulnerable, we're also forced to kind of be strong in ways, and we're also always balancing those dynamics. And are you, as a person who's claiming to be my ally, moving in those similar ways, being able to like check yourself, recognize that, it's not always going to be perfect, but you're trying. And that's where, again, that self-work. And I think part of that self-work is just being vulnerable, is an important piece. I wonder what were some of your thoughts?
No, I agree. And, I think about, Black feminist theory and womanist, like the womanist approaches and centering our voices, and what that looks like. And even, so also on the side, I teach at App State, and I teach org theory. And one of the things we're talking about right now is organizational structure and how do we create structures that are truly equitable. And so part of that is thinking, like, to Carla's point, what are your lenses? And if you are running an organization, running a meeting, running a department, a team, from this very top-down approach, it is harder to fully understand and have everyone fully be inclusive. And so what I have appreciated, to your point, Carla, is again, that observation. And no one is going to get everything right? We're not going to get everything right. But looking at how are people creating structures that are more equitable and sustainable. And in that, if they get it wrong, maybe I can help. And when I mess up, maybe they can help me. So looking at some of those structural pieces helps, because as we know, when we think about critical race theory and really dismantling, my God, all the white supremacy and oppression in our society, it is hard to do that with the master's tools. And so it's going to take a new mind. It's going to take a new way of imagining what we know to get to a true point of equity. And so when you have those allies and accomplices, they help further that. And you think about UNCG has been here 126, 7 somebody years. It is not going to be dismantled tomorrow, but it will be a series of very deliberate actions that gets us to that place. And if that action is calling someone out in a staff meeting, if that action is bringing someone to an interview because they deserve it, because the way that we structure a job description is so black and white, that someone that has similar experiences doesn't even qualify, then absolutely let's have that. So I think it's looking at the structure of those pieces too, and being able to push back on that and that inequity in the processes. And sometimes you're going to get it right, sometimes you're going to get it wrong. But if you're moving in that direction, then I'm there. What do you think, Carla? And anyone else on the panel too?
No, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I can't tell you how many staff meetings we've had where that's come up, or in other circles where that's come up. Well, I don't speak because I'm gonna get it wrong, or I don't even try because I don't know enough to even try or to even contribute to a conversation. So I think everything you're saying, I just want to lift up, because I think so often we're scared to say anything because we're gonna get it wrong. And I recognize the community and the relationships built when you have that vulnerability. So I think we definitely have to do better, but I just want to lift up your points.
Bree, I saw you unmute.
Dang, Shelly. I got nervous, but just kidding. So I just wanted to echo what Carla and Coretta were just saying. I think especially as a younger Black woman professional, I pay attention to what my mentors or other women who look like me in spaces that have the opportunity to sit at tables and in rooms that I don't have the privilege to sit in at this point. And so I think sometimes it's a little like off-putting when, you know, we are told that, hey, when you get to your job, like like year 1 and 2, like just be quiet, sit in the background, like don't really say or do anything, because you don't want to shake the table too much because you don't know anything. Like it's your first year and you just got here. And so I think sometimes, like, as a new professional, that is very disheartening, because then it also makes me feel like my voice doesn't matter. I would like to echo and kind of give snaps and kudos to like all of the women that are represented on this call, because I know I've had like bits and pieces of that type of conversation with you, and Coretta and Carla specifically, as my mentors. You all have been pouring into me and making sure that no matter what position I step into, like not to feel like that. Like it is okay sometimes to like not question every single thing if you're just getting somewhere, but to like learn the lay of the land. But I think understanding what learning the way in the lay of the land actually means is definitely necessary and helpful. So that's just what I wanted to add.
One thing too, and I add, because everything they said is fire, and if I could snap and you could hear it, it would work, is I think back to my days as an undergrad student in the same skin, and who opened doors for me. And so I think about, you know, if I was sitting in your seat watching YouTube tonight at 5:30, what does it mean to me as a student leader to look for that ally, to look for that accomplice? And I can tell you that people have opened doors. And so I want you to think about, who do you trust? Who can you establish relationships with? But some of my strongest relationships are people who don't look like me. One of my good friends, Robert Barker, is a white man. And I'll say this, I probably should say it on YouTube, but my mom, when she heard him talk thought he was a Black man. And oftentimes people who like listen to him are like, that's a Black man. No, he's white. But he's one of my dearest friends, personal friends, and a colleague here at UNCG. On our face, we have nothing in common. But we took the chance to get to know each other and to build that relationship. And now because I'm an accomplice too. And so as a student leader, I would say, get out, get to know people who look like you, but all skin folk aren't kinfolk. And so don't be afraid to go out and talk to that person who's different, right? If you're liberal, talk to a conservative. If you're white, talk to one, like get out there, and you may be surprised in who you truly get to know. And who may be a true accomplice and who may open that door for you. And I will say in full transparency, there are doors that will be open for you, because I'll speak that over your life, that you won't even know were open. You just walk into things and necessarily know how they happen, but it will be because in the same way we're watching and observing accomplices, people are also observing you. And they're looking to see who you are as a student leader day in and day out, and you're making a difference on campus. But I really encourage you to get out and get to know people who don't look like you. Robert Barker, one of my dearest friends. We've been friends for 13 years now, and I don't know. And he plays really good spades. So if you ever need a spades partner, go see him on the second floor of the UUC. Great man, but again, on face, we did not have a lot in common. But as we've gotten to establish that relationship over time, it's been one of the dearest relationships I've ever had. So I would say, as a student leader, go out, stretch yourself, because I found really good things have happened as a result.
All of the snaps. Thank you so much for that, y'all. Just quick interjection. I just wanted to, again, welcome all of you who are just now joining us. We definitely appreciate your time that you're spending with all of us. Before we move on to the next round, we are going to do just a quick mini introduction. And so myself and my colleagues are going to introduce ourselves, and then our panelists are going to introduce themselves. So we'll just do name, pronouns, and department that you are representing at UNCG. And so my name is Brianna Welsh. Pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm a coordinator for residence life in our housing department.
Awesome. Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Kenneth Francis Vaughn. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I serve as a program coordinator at UNCG's Campus Activities and Programs Department.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. My name is Megan Carbley. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an assistant dean of students in the Dean of Students office here at UNC Greensboro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Fullwood. I use she, her, and hers pronouns, and I am the Associate Director for the UNCG McNair Scholars Program.
Hello, I am Dr. Coretta Walker, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Parent Programs in the Division of Student Affairs at UNCG.
Hey, I'm Murphy Chappell. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Title IX coordinator at UNCG.
Good
All
evening.
right, well, thank you.
So sorry. Sorry, I'm Shelley Wald. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Dean of Students in the Dean of Students office.
Thank you, Shelley. So we're gonna thank everyone again for being here, and thank you all for working through some technical difficulties. So our next prompt is, describe how you think professional roles and your personal life engage in support and elevating Black women on campus. So in this, we want you to talk about when you felt like you got allyship wrong and or when you were called out and how you responded.
Sure. I think it's what I've been doing here in my normal life. I'm an introvert. So in larger groups, I tend to be a little bit more quiet and I observe a whole lot. But it also means that I take that time to make sure that my colleagues can speak, but specifically the Carla and Coretta on this call, making sure that they have the chance to speak. And I wasn't calling out Bree, but I wanted to make sure that the space was there, right? The pause was there so that Bree felt like she could share, because I could be on this call for hours. Megan knows this, like literal hours. I could talk about this, but I'm going to be succinct. So, I think that it's that being quiet. It's what Murphy has already done in this call. It's amplifying what we're hearing from the Black women that we work with and that are in our lives and saying, yes, I see that and hear that. And let me also say this again, because recognizing that sometimes in rooms, my voice, as much as I want it to be as equal as everybody else's, I recognize that for a variety of factors, that my voice carries more. I mean, I think I carry a lot of privileges, and white privilege is one of those, but I most certainly carry a lot more. And so I want to make sure that I'm giving that space, and I'm also amplifying voices. I also saw this great quote about get caught complimenting somebody behind their back. So I really don't gossip or trash talk, but most certainly when my colleagues talk to me about other colleagues I have, specifically women and specifically colleagues of color, I really amplify what they do on this campus and how wonderful they are and the things that they're doing to support our students. For me, a time that I got it wrong, there are many, so I'll choose just one. There was it's two things combined. So there was this really great symposium a couple of years ago, and it was a couple of associations got together, and it was a symposium on racial justice and racial climate. And so there was a wonderful Black woman who came on and said, "White people, get your people." And I thought, what do you mean get my people? I said, I most certainly, don't have the, like people in my life that, have the Confederate flag at their home and talk about, how it's, white supremacy forever. And so we're not that part of the spectrum. I also, don't, own this billion-dollar company that just goes out and makes lives better for Black people in America. So, there's work to do. So I was like, ooh, what a way to like push some people away. And so I had to reflect on that. But then also the unit I was working in around that same time, we had a speaker come in. And when she talked about white women's tears, some of my colleagues got very animated about that. And I thought, well, I get it, right? So if you don't know, white women's tears is about when conversations get difficult about white supremacy and about racism, that sometimes white women will respond with tears. And so then the conversation gets recentered on there, it's okay. You're not a bad person. You're doing a great job. Good for you. So the conversation goes away from the hard stuff that we need to focus on to the very centered around the person that we don't need to be centering. For me, I felt I can't be sad about what people that look like me have done to other people. And that's not, kind of the way in which it's meant. But those two events made me go, like, I don't feel good about this. This feels uncomfortable. I don't like it. And I'm upset about it. And so, again, as an introvert, I reflect a whole lot. I mean, there's a whole dialogue happening all day, every day in here. And so I thought a lot about it and talked to some people that I love very much. And those have been some of the best growing moments for me. So whenever I'm in a conversation and it feels uncomfortable, I go, yes, this is a great learning opportunity. So sometimes when I walk away and I'm not uncomfortable, then I'm like, man, I don't know that I picked up much out of that. How could I have dug deeper here? But I think it's being vulnerable and sharing when I got it wrong with other people that I think helps people to understand how they can then share theirs and reflect back on theirs that help us. And like Coretta was sharing earlier about when I get it wrong, it's awesome when people are like, hey, we need to kind of talk about this. Although I try to do it myself, right? But it's the same for others that we're able to kind of, I think as a white ally and accomplice, to call out and call into conversation my other white allies and accomplices, or just white people about, hey, let's talk about the impact that this had here. And this might be an awkward conversation, but for a white person to have it with another white person, I think is much more well received. So that's just the work that I'll do because, I'm willing to put it out there and do it.
It's so funny you brought up the white tears because it's so funny that I think we're culturized to not have difficult conversations. Like, I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up like, don't talk about this, or you always hear when you go on a first date, don't talk about politics or religion, and when you're making new friends, don't bring up. So we have been culturized not to have these difficult conversations, right? Or when we do get called out, to resort to tears, and not dissimilar to the experiences that you've had. I think one of the moments that has stuck with me professionally was I was going back and forth with a colleague, and I called her the wrong name. And when she called me out to call her the wrong name, she spelled my name wrong. And I was like, well, who are you to like tell me I got your name wrong when you're getting my name wrong. And I immediately got defensive about it, right? And it's that immediate defensive response that causes us to put up these barriers to growth, right? And I you got to be real, like, it's who I am, right? So I had that reaction, and I thought about it, and I'm like, why am I reacting like this? Like a misspelling is not the same, right? Because I didn't recognize the racism that underlies that, right? And that all Black women look the same, or all Black women's names are the same, right? Like that's real, right? And here I am calling this colleague of mine by the wrong name, right? And I was defensive about it, and I got it all the way wrong, right? And I thought a lot about it, and she probably doesn't know this because we don't talk anymore. Well, anyway, she don't work here anymore. I don't even know how to get in touch with her. But it was a profound moment for me, and I don't know that I've ever told her that, right? And her using her energy to call me in that moment, or call me out and say like, hey, like, you got this wrong, I will forever be thankful for, because it's helped me recognize the privilege or how that shows up in spaces, right? And it's helped me help some colleagues that I do cherish, because I've seen it now play out similarly, and then you can grow, and you can call some other folks in, and you can use those skills, right? But those, I just had to recognize that defensiveness in myself. And the other thing I like to do is like really listen. So we were, like to take family walks, and we're having this great walk one night, and my wife's going off about this thing that happened at work, and like all this stuff, and talking about how so-and-so wants to introduce her to so-and-so, but, and she's like, why? Because we're Black, and I would have thought like, oh, I would have done something like that, and so it was like this moment for me, like, dang, I introduce people because like they're Black. Like, what else do you have in common? Like, oh, like you'll understand each other's experiences. Let me go ahead and do that, right? So just like listening and having those moments, even if I, didn't do that thing, I would have done that thing like the next day, right? So it's really important to me just to listen more and to surround myself with folks that are willing to use their energy in these ways. And I hate that you have to, but I'm so thankful that you choose to use your energy like this and take these opportunities. But just more what I do on campus, just using these opportunities and just making sure that we're getting folks' voices to the table, right? I think some of the opportunities that I've been in unique positions where I've been at the table from the early stages and looked around and been like, whose voices are missing here? Like, what can we do to get that voice to this table? What experience isn't being shared here? And just trying to use those positions to do those things. But again, just learned all that the hard way, right? And so there's been a lot of growth, but just making sure I'm lifting up those in positions I can. And one of the things I've been super fortunate to be a staff Senate co-chair this year. And I was super excited about it. Like, I can't tell you how excited I was, right? But it was tough because like 2 white women were elected, you know what I mean? And so it's like, and both of us are really excited. So it's like, you don't want to like be like, well, I'll step back. But you got to work that out and just figure out what the systems were that contributed to that, right? And so we've, kind of had a lot of conversations about our policies, our procedures, about who we're nominating Senate, who we're electing to Senate, and what has been put in place that came before us. And so, even if we're both super excited to be in these positions now, what can we do to change it for the future to ensure that there are more diverse voices and experiences at that table, right? So that's just a little bit about what we're doing.
But you see, okay, so I know this isn't my time, but that story, right? Like, I got amped, and Murphy and we've talked about this a bit, but that story right there about being co-chair of Staff Senate, to me, highlights or demonstrates what I mean about that self-work that folks pay attention to. That, we're not saying, at least I'm not saying for people to like miss opportunities or to what have you, but it's to be conscious. And how you even said, to be conscious of, okay, so we were elected, right? And what's happening that at the university, at the Senate, at this Senate, microcosm, or the whole university, that sets this up. And, or, sets up, what representation is, who's elected, not elected, involved, not involved. That's the extra step that most folks don't take. That's when it becomes problematic. That some folks that's to me, the difference between the allyship and accomplice is somebody that's just like, bet. So I'm co-chair, but guess what I'm going to do? And is ask these questions or raise up or try to figure certain things out to recognize what's missing or what's happening here. And that's the piece, that's different, whereas some folks would just be like, oh, okay, but but I earned it. And nobody said you didn't earn it. And recognizing, do we question some of the bigger things at play? And that's why I think moves the needle a little bit further from just being an ally.
Yeah, one of the things that I heard Murphy, you and Shelley really say, and that Carla's highlighted, is the willingness as a white ally and accomplice to lean where the discomfort is, right? And to become accustomed to, right? It takes practice to, one, notice the discomfort without that defensiveness, and to then say, I'm going to dive right into it and figure out what that's about and who it's serving, right? How is that defensiveness serving me? What can I gain from the discomfort to learn about myself, but also how I'm impacting other people in the process. And I think one of the things that resonates with me is you all share your stories, and we hear from each of you. As I can think of times when we've been in conversation together one-on-one or as a group, because I've gotten a chance to work with each of you in small and large ways, where I can see where this has come alive in you. And part of what I hope folks get out of today, especially white folks listening and watching, and white women who, as Shelley had alluded to earlier, like we do need to collect our people, right? And like how are we going beyond the folks that already think similarly to us? I think for me, this is the big question, because I work at an institution that has conversations like this, and I'm in a doctoral program that's very critical and social justice oriented. I am challenged to figure out who am I missing that I could pull into the conversation, rather than only surrounding myself with people who just validate the things that I already say as an ally. So kudos to UNCG and the folks that I'm around. But I think that's also part of the work. Like once you start leaning into it, I have found that I actually get excited about it. I start to notice like, this is like, ooh, that pushed me in a weird way. And Murphy's one of the people that I'll get on the phone with and say, hey, this came up, because I would suggest going to other white people first to kind of work out those icky feelings, to say, hey, reflect this back to me. Like, what did I miss? And then go do it differently the next time, right? And to not work it out on Black women or Black folks in general. Like, I also have a great relationship with Coretta, but if I messed a thing up, I'm not going to go to Coretta first and say, hey, I said this really terrible thing. Because that can also come across, right? I don't want Coretta to feel like she then has to hold my feelings, right? For me, that's like, I might as well just be crying in your lap. And I'm not trying to do that. I'm so energized by this conversation. I'm going to stop right there because we've got another round, but go ahead, Coretta.
Real quick, Megan, I want to add to that point though. I think if you came to me to cry every now and then because you tried and it failed, I'm here for you, right? If you come to me every day, you got to find another friend, right? I could buy you some tissues because you're not doing the work. And I think part of what I've heard in this conversation is the importance of doing the work. And so I won't say to you, because we have this relationship, and also to other Black women, there are times once you built those relationships with those accomplices that they to you, but they tried and it didn't work. And what I found in that moment that's helped me is to listen with intention and listen with authenticity. And then that helps our relationship develop further too. And so, Megan, I'm not every day, no. But I do think if you've made a really hard effort or done something that is way outside your comfort zone, I'm still here for you, because a more equitable place for Black women is going to serve us all. And I always bet on Black women. So if you bet on Black women, we betting together, we're going to be good. If you cry because I got you. Thanks, Fred. I appreciate it, Carla. Yeah.
A question before, and hopefully it can lead us into the next round. And I'll selfishly say this is my academic, perhaps research brain coming in. So we're here, right? We're here, we're engaged in this conversation. I'm super energized as well. And the whole purpose, I know we're talking about like allyship, accomplishment, accomplices, but the whole purpose is to center Black women's voices. What does that mean? I guess is my question. So if you identify as a Black woman, I guess, what would you describe or define as Black women's voice? And if, or even as allies, I ask you, like, what do you understand and define as Black women's voice?
That's a really powerful question, and thank you for bringing that to this space. For me, when I think about Black women's voices and what that means, it's not always a sound that I think about, right? I think it's the ability to be authentically you in every space, and for people to see you as a Black woman and understand that you are going to be able to contribute something very unique to every space that you're in. And I feel like oftentimes when I am in spaces, I don't think people see that. I don't think people realize that. I don't think people understand that because of my intersectionality, being a woman and being Black, I'm going to bring a very unique lived experience to the table. And a lot of the times, these experiences are going to be so important to conversations, but oftentimes I'm not even asked, right? And oftentimes I don't feel comfortable putting my voice or my thoughts or anything into those spaces. So when thinking about centering Black women's voices, when we were creating this program, a big part of that, what that meant for me was allowing Black women to be authentically them in a space. And that means speaking for their needs, right? A lot of things that we need as Black women, and I'm speaking for myself, like I don't always feel very comfortable speaking about it. For example, if I'm in a meeting and the only voices I've heard all meeting are white male voices, how do I vocalize that this meeting was not productive because your lived experience is not the lived experiences that are going to get us to where we need to go. So when I think about centering Black women's voices, that is what I'm thinking about. So again, just being authentically you, bringing your specific needs into a space and have them listened to, not catered to, but understood, and people understand, and they're just not listening, but they hear you.
Kenneth, I think you raised great points. And a lot that I was going to say. I think about recognizing that Black women we're not a monolith, right? So as you're doing the work, as we're doing the work, the reality is that I am not Carla. We are both dope, but I am not Carla, right? There's so many things we have in common. If you assume that when Carla walks into the room, that I walk into the room, you've made the first wrong misstep. So I think, to Kenneth's point, allowing space for us to be who we are unapologetically, and again, not having those conversations about, did you see Coretta's earrings, or did you see Kenneth's hair, or did you? First of all, say that to my face. But I think the other piece of that is we're not a monolith, and you cannot paint our experience with very broad stroke, and just being open to what that is, to get to know us individually and not being dangerous with assuming we're all the same.
And I think for me, it's about not dismissing my voice. So if I was brought to the table or to the space or the room, what have you, whether it was to check off a diversity box, to be the token, whatever makes you feel better for my presence to exist in your space, do not dismiss my voice, because whether or not you wanted my voice at this table, you got it. So at this point, you're gonna have to deal with it. And I think for me, a lot of people don't understand how to accept me. And I think where they go wrong is they think I'm looking for their acceptance when I'm not. What I'm doing is I am coming to the space to probably tell you something you A, do not want to hear, B, don't want to have the conversation about, and C, definitely don't want to have the conversation with me about it. Because I am going to make you feel uncomfortable. I am going to force you to think about what you said. And I am going to make sure that you understand the impact that your words are having on the people that are not present in this space just because they're not here. And I think sometimes people go wrong when they are just talking to be talking, kind of like what Kenneth was saying. If, only white people have spoken in a space, and then I say something, and then all of a sudden You're being rude, you're being aggressive, you're being hostile. Oh my gosh, are you okay? Well, why didn't you ask them if they were okay? Because we just said the same thing. Yes, my voice is raised because now I'm pissed off. And so if you allowed me to speak when I was trying to speak and didn't diminish who I was and how I showed up as a person, then now I wouldn't be upset. And so I think sometimes that's what it means for me, because growing up, my voice was always silent. So then by the time I got to a space where I was able to speak, I was infused with rage. I was mad because for so long, people told me like, be quiet, like play in the background, don't do anything, lay low, like just wait your turn. And all of you know that is not my personality, like whatsoever. And so it's just like, when somebody tells me that, it's just like, Bree, who you are is not good enough. So I need you to be like a watered down version. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And so the only way I knew was to just like be proud and be loud. And if I was going to be loud, then I was going to be angry and loud. I was going to be happy and loud. I was going to be prideful and loud. Like no matter what it was going to be, I wanted to make sure that people knew who I was when I entered a space, because I wanted to make sure that anybody else that came into the space after me didn't have to go through what I went through, because I self-sabotaged myself because I allowed myself to believe what everybody else was telling me. And I remember distinctly this conversation I had with Shelly when I first got here, her face. And I think this is really important because I came from a hostile work environment. And unfortunately, my previous supervisor also name was Shelly. And so when I was told that I would have to work with Shelly in close capacity, all of the triggering things that it brought up for me that I was still trying to figure out how to deal with, I had to pull her aside. I said, look, you don't know me and I don't know you, but I need you to know something about me. Your name is very triggering for me and it has nothing to do with you, but everything to do with that name still being with a white female that I did not have good rapport with, that I was not able to be myself with. So it's going to take me some time to like get used to working with you, to get used to being myself around you, just because like I feel very uneasy and I'm tired of walking on eggshells. And Shelly's response was, okay, thank you for telling me that. And she was like, when you're ready to have a conversation, I'm ready to listen. And I'll be here for you no matter how long that takes. And I'm gonna get emotional, but that meant a lot to me, because that was the first time that a white woman saw me. And I wasn't used to that. And so, like this space means a lot, because hearing from allies and just overall support and wanting to know what can they do to support us in spaces that I don't have the privilege in being, but also not just saying certain things, but literally living that out every single day. And no matter the interaction that they have with you in person, in private, in public, or if other people are around that you might not know, they're still authentically themselves. That is also uplifting your authentic self. And so that's what, long story less long, as Kenneth would say, like that's what centering Black voices means to me and why this is so important.
I will very quickly say, Bree, you keep being you, and if people aren't okay with it, you just send them to me, because I'm ready. You just send them on over. I'm ready. Thank you for sharing that. It's very sweet, and I know what I'm going to do in the car on the whole way home. I'm just going to cry as I turn up my music. It'll be fun to watch.
Yes, thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing, Bree. Your voice always matters in this space, and it matters in every space. And if, again, they don't realize it, then we'll make them realize it. We do have a quick question from an audience member that I wanted to throw out to our panelists before we move on to our next round. As a young Black male, what should I do to be a better ally to Black women?
So I think we've hinted at this. Isaiah, thank you for that question. I think we hinted at this a little bit, but to think about who's at the table, who's present at the table, and whose voices are being there. As we mentioned earlier, you can be an accomplice at a table, and if another Black woman isn't there, you can advocate for you can offer a different perspective. One of the things we know from my research, I was thinking about this, is that I looked at Black women who are leaders in higher ed and people who are connected to them and who are most influential in their career aspirations. And like 80% of those most important people were other Black women, and Black men did not show up. And then we also know, based on Black women's positions in both racial and gender groups that are oppressed, that even when we look at people who are aspiring to be college presidents and college vice presidents, that Black men than Black women, even if they have the same degree, and oftentimes some men don't have the same degree, but they still persist at a higher rate. And so I think part of that is recognizing that you will be in spaces sometimes that you've earned, but that there are people around you who would love to be in those spaces, to open in that door, asking those questions, because your space does not matter. I want to thank you for that question. It's a very powerful question, and I'm so glad that you're being vulnerable to ask how you can be included. But I welcome other voices as well.
I think one thing that I'll add, or a couple of thoughts that I'll add, is even reflected in why I asked the previous question. In recognizing that this idea of voice is so nuanced and so personalized to Black women. So Dr. Walker said this earlier, like Black women are not a monolith. And so there are some similar things that we'll experience because of having the intersections of Black identity and women identity. But what that looks like, and I think Kenneth said this earlier, like it's not just creating space for what you hear to be heard, or allowing spaces to talk, or what have you. It's supporting Black women being their authentic selves, and knowing that across the spectrum of Black womanhood, that's going to look different, and being open to that more times than not, Black women have been told to act a certain way, perform a certain way, and whatnot. Now, I'm not saying that Black men don't do that. I'm not even saying white women don't. But there's that double whammy, that there's some ways in which Black women are kind of told to or expected to perform, that there's other ways that naturally comes to them that's naturally accepted in society, perhaps based on their racial identity. For some of our Black brothers, there's certain ways that, yes, society tells you to perform and act and do. That's part of the struggle. And there are some aspects just by nature of holding manhood or identifying as a male, and sometimes as a cisgender male, that is just sometimes naturally accepted, and you're not necessarily having to think on those pieces. There's an in-between that Black women hold that we're constantly trying to battle. And to me, to be the best ally is to just recognize that. Is to just recognize that there's a way in which that we're moving in the space, that the space, society, higher ed, college campuses, the boardroom, the club organization meeting is just inherently set up to not necessarily accept us in our fullness. So you have women who are battling, having the internal conversation of, I know what I'm saying is dope. I know what I'm saying is gonna make sense. I know what I know that I know what I'm saying. And I probably have to say it in this way because my male counterparts, if I say it too aggressively, I'm a B word or what have you. Or if I say it, too shy, I'm not, smart enough. And, so there's all these things that if I do it this way as a woman, it's like this. Or if I do it this way as a Black person, it's like this. And so again, it's not to say that other people are not navigating like a struggle in their own way, but there's a uniqueness that happening within Black womanhood to just be conscious of, and being conscious of that and thinking about that and how might that be different for me. And if you can think on that, then you're probably like working towards being that ally of recognizing what should I be nuancing right now. Very similar to how Murphy, I loved again that story. Yes, I'm elected, I'm here at the table. All right, what should I be nuancing right now because of what I see or perhaps don't see? And even from the quotes that were shared earlier in the opening, you know, it's not just creating space for me to talk. It's creating space perhaps for me to talk authentically, or creating space for me to just be. And recognizing that sometimes just being means I'm not going to talk today because there's some strategy, or there's some intentionality, and like I don't have to say anything today. But I need to be there. I should be there. I should be present. I should be engaged, and be paying attention to that, and supporting that. Or when I say that, or the wholeness, all of it for Black womanhood, I think allows you to work towards being a better ally.
And I think some of the Title IX is going to come out right now, right? But I don't even think about all of the tables that you're already at, or the formal opportunities for you to be a great ally. But please don't forget the informal runs, right? The conversations where people are dogging Black women, or, you know, if they're saying about these experiences, or, oh, you know what you heard? Like, don't let those voices, you know, surround you. Like, shut them down. Like, it's not always the formal places, but like the disenfranchisement of Black women, I think, starts at such a young age. Like, we can even start to do something about that now. So
thank y'all so much for your comments, and really digging deep in the questions that are being asked. So as we kind of transition towards the end of our conversation, one, I want to remind participants that you all can submit questions or comments as you have any, and respond to the prompt. And so one of the things that's been resonating with me over the last couple of weeks, full transparency, not only my doctoral student, but I source a lot of information from the Instagram. So I think there's a lot of good information out there. A lot of folks doing really hard work. So give them money if you're using their work on Instagram, I'll say that. But someone shared the sentiment that saying that a space or a thing is supportive is different than creating a space designed for people. And I've been thinking about that in terms of our work in the Dean of Students office, and as it relates to the conversation we want to have today as we start to close, in relationship to UNCG's culture of care. When we initiated this conversation with students, we wanted to know, how did that sit? What did that mean for Black women students at UNCG? So as we're thinking about saying everyone is welcome here versus this is made for you, as we filter the culture of care through that lens, and this is open to participants, to panelists, folks watching remotely, how does UNCG's culture of care include or sustain, which I think are two different things, Black women? And conversely, how not? What is missing? And what are the gaps that need to be filled?
all right, well, I'll just jump right in then. Carla and Corinne, I see you sitting there now. You know, the funny thing is, I don't think we run enough data. Whether it's staffing data, faculty data, like representation, like I think the big ones are maybe obvious, but how many offices are collecting demographic data about who they're serving, and then comparing that to our enrollment percentages, right? And is there a similar makeup? Like, and so that's some of the work that we're doing with the Campus Violence Response Center, right? Looking at that demographic data, thinking about who we're not serving, why we're not getting there, talking to those groups. So I think there are a lot of gaps, like don't get me wrong, right? But I also think sometimes perceptions are there and the data doesn't back them up, right? So are you running the data to back up your perception or looking at your perceptions? And I would almost want to ask about the perception before I brought the data forward, right? And see how folks are feeling and how they're feeling about the working here. I think one of the biggest gaps that I've identified, or seen and really got challenged on with the event, you know, Shelley reminded me of it a little bit earlier. You know, shout out to Asia, if this makes its way to her. But you know, there was an event following the R. Kelly documentary, right? And I think our group wanted to make like Black Women Matter or Black Girls Matter, I think, t-shirts or pins or something like that, right? And when the idea was brought up, it was, okay, but what about, right? But like, why do we have to talk about all the marginalized groups, or why do we have to talk about all these folks? Like, why can't we focus on this one, especially after an R. Kelly event where the focus was on Black girls and their impact of sexual violence in R. Kelly, right? And so one of the disappointing things I think, or the tough parts that are about working here, is that it's always about, well, what about the rest, right? Or what about these people? Because the fear of exclusion keeps us from advancing things or to trying to even do things at the time, right? So, just a couple thoughts about some of the gaps.
And Murphy.
Oh, go ahead, Coretta. Okay, tag me in, Coach. Go, let me go after Coach.
I'll be real quick. I know whatever Carla's going to say is going to shake this whole room. I want to say to Murphy's point, one of the things, so for 5 years, my first 5 years here, I worked in housing. And then, first 4, and then I moved up to the division's office. And the one thing I would hear sometimes is when we think about the students that we're trying to engage is, well, Black women are active. Black women are leading. Black women are the highest percentage. They're good. But no. And also my question next would be, so why are they good? Right. And the people who feel marginalized as staff and faculty feel what way? And we see this exodus of people who leave, including now, what do they look like? And so this connection of, I think what we haven't figured out is essentially assuming that Black women got it because they are leading our campuses in such powerful ways, but not looking at the infrastructure that's present that's making them successful. And what is not is the structure we have overall. It's these Starbucks conversations, it's the, you about to somebody pissed you off, you about to go off on them, let's go walk down Sterling and blow some steam. It's the conversation, it's the getting the name right, it is the yo, I see you. It is those things that are keeping Black women here. It is not inherently the structure of UNCG. And so I think I would love just to see us doing deeper dives into why are they doing so well, right? Because that could then, to Murphy's point, provide data to be a model. But we brag about it, but we're not doing work to recognize who's holding Black women up. And if we figure that out, I think UNCG would be much better for it. But Carla, yeah, I'm sure you have some doper stuff to say.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Very similarly, I've been at UNCG for 5 years. Within those 5 years, I think within the last 4, that's what we were classified as an MSI, minority serving institution. So yes, we're very proud of that. And I'm proud of that too. Like, I work here, I'm a Spartan. By working here, I'm a student here, so I get that. But that was the question that I've always asked. One, we're MSI by nature of more than 25% of our students identifying as Black. Something, and I think the statistics are the same, but something that I've continued to hear is that the highest graduating demographic were undergraduate Black women. And very similarly, it's like this underlying assumption that, oh, but they're graduating at high rates, they're leading organizations, they're good. Says who? Because I could name on a weekly basis, anecdotally, women that would stop by my office that they're not doing so great at this institution. I think the better question is, how are y'all doing? How exactly are y'all graduating at such high rates at a place that's not inherently meant for you and structurally not really supporting you? And I think if we could tap in, so this is where like the assessment or research brain, whichever one, and to Murphy's point, collecting data, if we could figure out how exactly are these women graduating, right? And, and leading in places that are not really set up for them. And they get that message loud and clear every day. I ain't trying to call people out, but they get it as student leaders. They get it as RAs. They get it as, top scholars, that this space is not meant for me. And so I've also been here and seen there's a lot of great initiatives to come out and support our men. I ain't saying, men of color and Black males don't need work and or, marginalized groups based on class, first gen, I'm a first gen. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, and maybe this is even like, so let interest convergence work for us. Why can we go and get some data in figuring out how exactly are these women thriving instead of creating all these new initiatives for all these other demographics? Because I think, Coretta or Murphy's point, it's this Black women and how about these? I think we get so much into the and to be inclusive and not thinking about, are we being equitable? And thinking about, okay, if Black women are so-called succeeding, one, how do we know that to be true? Because numbers can say one thing, but what exactly is their lived experience on this campus? And two, if that is so true, then gosh, there must be a magic formula in there that y'all can probably tap into to figure it out for other groups. But do y'all really want to ask that question? Do y'all really want to go find out the experiences? And I'm just talking about the undergraduate Black women, right? We didn't even tap into grads. We didn't even tap into staff or faculty and really think about folks that are staying, what exactly is causing them to stay. For some, it may be, yes, UNCG. Again, I love UNCG. I think there's so much potential at a place like UNCG. But are we really getting the information? What's causing women to stay or to so-called succeed, right? And because we could put the air quotes or define, the descriptors around that. But are we really prepared to hear their stories? Are we really prepared to get the information at a university that was historically white, at a historically white women's college? Are we really prepared to shift the narrative and hear the counter story? And so that, to me, for the culture of care, I want to be candid and yet as compassionate as I can be. If we really want to create a culture of care, are y'all really ready to hear the stories? Are y'all really ready to hear the experiences of our undergraduate students? And I'm going to throw in there of our staff and our faculty, particularly Black women who are sometimes shepherding and holding white women's tears in meetings because they don't have the voice, but they'll shift and become somebody's mammy or turned into somebody's mammy real quick. Or they have to go and, sometimes for self-preservation, have to go and protect and cater to other people and not even there, being able to tend to their research or protect themselves. Or the Black women who are mentoring other Black women, Black males, white males, young white women, because, because that's just almost seen and expected that that's what you do. So to me, to create that culture of care is, are y'all really ready to hear and gather those stories to then really center what care can look like for this community?
But you've got it, Carla, though. It's Black women supporting other Black women. That's what I see, right? When I see, strong student leaders that are Black women, it's, well, who are you working with? Like, who are you being mentored by? Like, who are you going to go to get advice about this? And it's other Black women. And so, as y'all were talking about earlier, the word I think of is exhausting. Exhausting to support all these other Black women on campus so that they can be successful, so that you can be successful. Because, there is that like lumping into categories, right? And also, it's the having to like code switch, right? So when can I show up in that space and be authentic? And when do I have to hold the white women's tears? And when do I have to not say anything because it's not going to come out in a way that's going to be palatable as determined by other people and not kind of where I'm at? And I completely recognize it because Coretta knows this. We sat in enough residence life meetings together where sometimes I'd say, look, y'all, like this is exactly how I'm going to say it. And I don't care. But I recognize that privilege has not always been afforded to everybody else. And I'm very lucky to be able to do that. And so I think it is like, that's what I see is it's Black women supporting other Black women, doing all the other things, and then being exhausted. So how you do it all, I'm not certain, but there's got to be, right? We've got to dig and do some work to figure out like, what are some of those mechanisms we can put into place to help our students, our Black women, to be successful that doesn't continually profit off the labor of other Black women, right? It's a cycle.
I want to agree that it is exhausting, but I also want to honor that it's rejuvenating. Because my God, when I look at my sisters doing all types of things, I am here for all of it. And so in all of your shine, we can be here for the tears and the bad words and the good words and all those things, is that it is rejuvenating to serve along so many of you, and to cheer you on and to have your back and to advocate. So I've seen so much amazing things be accomplished by our Black student leaders, by women and our Black students, by Black women. We continue to kill it. And so, yeah, there are many days I want to take a nap and I wake up and I work hard because I know that our Black women student leaders need us here. So you are killing the game. And I think, at least for me, you keep me going. You keep me in meetings. I show up, I'm loud, I throw some humor in there, but we're going to get the job done because we're doing it for you. So just know that we see you and you inspire us. So I just want to make sure to connect to Shelly's point. It matters, you matter, and keep doing what you're doing. And we got your back. Throw it on.
And I like a magical thing just happened from where I'm sitting. When Bree and Kenneth and I first sat down and talked about, a vision of what purpose this space could serve, based on what we'd heard, what some of our experiences were. We talked about the culture of care. When we sat down with our student focus group, we talked about that. And the thing that was shared was, that started to unfold when we asked students, how do you feel supported at UNCG? Who does that support? Oh, I feel very supported. But it's by Black staff, it's by Black faculty, it's by other Black students. And so to Carla's point, I would agree, right? And as Murphy said, looking at the numbers, how are we pulling back the layers to say, are we saying you're welcome, or are we building it for you? And leaning into the discomfort of what we will likely uncover if we're truly asking those tough questions as an institution. And I think being in community with one another and holding an institution accountable that we also, I also deeply love UNCG, also first-gen student, went here for undergrad, and it changed my life. And for that reason, because I can see, like Carla said, the potential that the institution has, I'm going to ask us all really tough questions, and I want the same back. And I want our students to look back or be back here in 10 years and say, now it's time for the next thing. How do we keep going?
And I love, to your point, Megan, and and this is, again, not me dismissing that there's other narratives and other communities that can, that can be brought into the fold. But I also, unapologetically be biased in terms of how I see myself as a Black woman, and also how, some of what I'm studying. But I should know this quote. I don't know, forgetting, you could help me on this, Megan, from Black Feminist Theory class, if it's the Combahee River Collective. But if you liberate Black women, you liberate all, right? And so if we create spaces, I love how you even said, like, are we building this for you? If we're intentionally creating spaces that's looking at the intersections of Black women's identities, I think more than likely you're going to hit the mark on creating spaces that's including other groups that are often marginalized. And so to me, it's, I'm not, well, maybe I am, because again, unapologetically, I think Black women are dope. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying to only put us on a pedestal, but if you kind of create that line of thinking, I think for the most part, you will probably hit all marks of creating an equitable space if you're kind of looking at it through the intersections of Black women's lenses and experience. So my thing, again, is you liberate Black women, you liberate all and others.
Well, that was amazing. It's like, that was a mic drop moment. Like, what? Well, everyone, that's it. That's all we got. This was a liberating conversation. It was an emotional one. It was a vulnerable one. But at the end of the day, I appreciate all of you for creating the space with us, for actively stepping in, but also reserving yourself when you feel as though, you know what, my voice doesn't need to say anything right now, but also recognizing the continuous work that all of you, all of us have put in and will continue to put in, and just basically validating who we are and how we show up to these spaces that we all have with each other. So without further ado, that is the end of our first session of our 3-part series. We definitely want to thank our panelists and our lovely audience on YouTube Live for joining us this evening. You all have been incredible. They have been shouting us out in the comments. So when you all get the opportunity to, please make sure you check that out, just because a lot of our students and colleagues out there have been giving us kudos. And so on behalf of the leadership team for Blue Table Talk, we greatly appreciate your support and hope to see you all in, it's February, so March for the second series. And that one will be focusing on, Kenneth, help me with that one.
Oh yeah, awesome. So our next our next Blue Table Talk will be talking to different Black women professionals in the Carolinas. So helping our Black women students to connect with folks in the community, because as you all know, now, role modeling and mentorship is so very important for Black women. So we want to be able to facilitate that as well. And some folks were asking, just a quick question, is it okay if students reach out to you all individually? My panelists, awesome. So we will share those email addresses in the YouTube chat in just a moment. But before we end it, so we have 3 minutes. If you all wanted to do a quick summary of what you all are taking away from this panel, and we can start with whoever would like to.
So I want to say there is work to be done. And I think that is something that we recognize and resonated with me tonight. But there is so much hope that's happening along with that. So I leave with a duty to do more, a duty to be more diligent, a duty to be more consistent, more visible, but also just resting in the hope that exists and the power of this conversation and the power of those who are watching.
Yeah, I'm leaving with keep the conversations going. I hope that these types of conversations, the questions that are coming up in the comments, don't end after this YouTube stream. So continuing the conversations, continuing to engage and build those relationships. I think we said that relationships is kind of one of the key things around the allyship and accomplish interaction. So build those relationships and keep the conversation going.
I'm thinking about how to use what I learned tonight and the skills that I do have to make a difference and to keep the work going. One of the things I'm thinking about that I've heard a lot tonight is, the data and getting the experiences and wanting to pay folks for that. And so I'm thinking about grant opportunities and want to, be re-energized to look for those and think about how we can bring some of that to our campus so we can make those things happen.
I'd say I'm leaving with a lot. Definitely momentum, a to-do list, how we can kind of keep this moving and not let this end here, right? Like what's that action that can go forward? Light and energy and just goodness. It feels wonderful. And thank you to being able to share this space with all of the people, on this chat, and then all the people out there that I do hope that y'all connect with us. You shouldn't have to ask if you can email us. Like, of course you can. So please contact us because we want to do all the things. That's what this is about, is picking up that ladder and how do you help people kind of keep it moving on up with you.
Awesome. I think we got to everyone who wanted to share a closing thought. Again, on behalf of, I guess, the official Blue Table Talk planning team, Kenneth, Bree, and I, thank y'all. Thanks to the panelists for being so excited and eager to be part of this conversation. To those of you who we can't see who are participating with us, thank you so much for sharing your Tuesday evening with us. We are grateful to you and this entire community. Thank y'all so much and have a wonderful evening.